Good Shabbos, everybody. So, as most of you are aware, a leading light of the Montreal faith community was laid to rest earlier this week. Father John, as he was affectionately known, was active in promoting better relations between Jews and Christians since 1973, when he returned from an 8-month visit to Israel with a group of students. And when talking about other faiths, Father John said, and I quote, "We have different religions and cultures, but we all recognize one God. How can it possibly be that he has different compartments for all the different religions? We share a reasonably common vision of God. It's up to us to get along better and recognize that maybe we have more in common than we thought." Very interesting comment. In 2015, the Vatican issued a remarkable document about the Jewish faith. It was called "The Gifts and the Calling of God Are Irrevocable." In that document, the Pope affirmed that God keeps his covenants and the Jewish people are in a special relationship with God. When it came out, Father John wrote an article titled "Listen to the Whisper." And that document, that article, was published on the Convivium website. In his article, Father John reflected on 3 goals for Jewish-Christian dialogue. 1, to help us reach a profound knowledge of each other, whereby the partners become the recipients of the gifts. 2, to foster joint engagement throughout the world for justice, peace, conservation of creation and reconciliation. And the 3rd goal, to combat all manifestations of racial discrimination against Jews and all forms of anti-Semitism. Father John put into practice the words he preached. He didn't just talk, but he walked the walk. The changing Catholic attitudes towards the Jews, expressed by Father John and codified by the Nostra Aetate, the revolutionary document from the Church over 50 years ago that transformed Roman Catholic policy and attitudes towards the Jews, is a remarkable change of centuries of official church anti-Semitism. Many Jews, I have to tell you, were very skeptical of the Catholic efforts to reach out to the Jews. "The leopard doesn't change the color of its spots," they said, quoting a Talmudic dictum and thinking of horrors such as the Inquisition, when Jews were hunted down, tortured, and killed by the church. And if you haven't seen it yet, there is a very good movie that you should watch. It's called Goya's Ghost. Have you seen it? You should see it. It's you might think it's funny, but when you see the actual movie, it shows the torture of Jews in the Inquisition. Goya's Ghost. G-H-O-Y-A. Goya.
The artist
The artist, yes, thank you. Goya's Ghost. Let's not forget Pope Pius XII, who many Jews feel didn't speak loud enough, didn't speak up do enough to try to stop the Holocaust or help the Jews. Relations between siblings are often fraught, and Judaism and Christianity are siblings. Some Jews mistakenly think, and I've heard this even said by professors, academics, they think that Judaism is the parent and that Christianity is the child. But that is not accurate. Judaism was reinvented in the 1st century after the destruction of the Second Temple. Judaism and Christianity date from the same time, both based on the older temple-centered sacrificial religion. This week's Torah portion is a prime example of how fraught relations between siblings can be. Right at the start of this week's reading, Jacob and Esau are struggling in the womb. Mentioned that when we started with the Torah reading. The rabbis were very quick to let us know which brother was the good brother and which brother was the bad brother. They say that the struggle was because Jacob wanted to get out and go to the Beit Midrash, and that Esau wanted to go out and go to a place of idol worship. That's how the rabbis explain it. Esau was the man's man, a hunter, a trapper, was his daddy's favorite. Jacob, on the other hand, liked to hang around the house. The Torah tells us. The Torah says, Yoshev Oholim. He sat in the tent. In other words, he's a mama's boy. No doubt the parental favoritism helped fuel the sense of rivalry. Jacob comes across as not very nice, refusing to feed his hungry brother until he sells him the birthright for a bowl of lentil soup, conspiring with his mother to steal Isaac's deathbed blessing to Esau. It's no surprise that Esau is furious with Jacob, and that Jacob feels the need to flee for his life. Jacob, of course, later receives the name Israel after struggling through the night with an angel. He is the representative of Israel, of the Jewish people. And Esau is called Edom, came to be associated with Rome in the rabbinic imagination, making Esau the father of and the representative of the Christian world. In the history of the relations between Jews and Christians, it's clear that the Jews are the ones who first rejected Christians. It's not the other way around. The early Christians in the 1st century, and I would say also into the early 2nd century, were mostly observant Jews who just happened to believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Very simple to today's world, where many Jews associated with the Chabad movement believe that Menachem Mendel Schneerson is the Messiah and he's going to come back from the dead. You can believe in the wrong Messiah and still be Jewish. Back in the 2nd century, our great rabbis, Rabbi Akiva believed that Bar Kokhba was the Messiah. And he kept that belief until Bar Kokhba was killed by the Romans. And in the 16th century, you had Shabtai Tzvi. Most of the Jewish world believed that he was the Messiah, until the Ottomans gave him the option. You convert to Islam or you die. He chose Islam, devastating the Jewish community. As the early Christians drifted further away from Jewish teachings and incorporated more elements of Greek thought into their religion, they increasingly came to be viewed as heretics by the rabbis. So much so that the rabbis added a 19th blessing into the Shemona Esrei. Shemona Esrei, by the way, means, anybody know what it means? Shemona Esrei. 18. That was its name. Shemona Esrei, 18. The rabbis added a 19th blessing at that time. You know which one they added? The one about the heretics. Let there be no hope for the informers, and may all the heretics and all the wicked instantly perish. A blessing that we recite in the weekday Amidah to this very day. Over time, as converts from paganism became the majority of Christians, and Christianity increasingly severed itself from Judaism, Jews and Christians came to see each other as different, as the other. But for a few hundred years, it didn't matter. Jews or Christians. They were both persecuted minorities. The Romans didn't give a damn either way. Persecuted both of them. But then, when Constantine converted to Christianity in the 4th century, and Christianity became the official state religion of Rome, everything changed. The Christians were now in power, and the Jews were a minority. And you know what happened? The oppressed became the oppressors. Also in the 4th century, St. Augustine said Jews should be kept around as witnesses to the prophecies. You know what St. Augustine called Jews? He said, the house of Israel that God has cast off, those on whose closed eyes he shed his light. And you know what happened with those statements? That led to official church doctrine for 1,600 years, that the Jews were a people abandoned by God, and Christians had inherited a new covenant, taking the place of the old covenant God had with the Jewish people. When the Pope came to temporal power, they used it to issue anti-Semitic decrees. Jews were banned from serving in public office. They were forced to live in ghettos. The first ghetto, anybody know where the first ghetto was?
Italy?
Yes.
Rome.
In Rome. The first ghetto in the 15th century in Rome. That was the first time we come across ghettos. It is very true. And they were forced to wear distinctive clothing. By the way, that's where the name ghetto comes from. You should know that. You research it. And they were forced to wear distinctive clothing. And it seems for many Jews, there simply was no escape. The Spanish Inquisition was focused on Jews who converted to Christianity to avoid persecution. Jews were called Christ killers. And Easter week was a time Jews hid terrified. In the 19th century, a six-year-old Jewish boy, and I've spoken about this before in other sermons, a 6-year-old boy, Edgardo Mortara, in Italy, was seized by the Catholics, kidnapped from his family, taken by the police, and raised as a Catholic. You know why? Because a former servant testified that she had given the boy an emergency baptism as an infant. So in papal states, at that time, it was illegal for non-Christian families to raise a Christian child. There was an international outcry, international protests, but Pope Pius IX didn't care. By the time the papal state collapsed, the boy was already grown, and he was training to become a priest with the Pope as his substitute father. In the 20th century, Pope Pius XI gave some very nice speeches. In 1938, he said, anti-Semitism is inadmissible. We are all spiritually Semites. But you know what? He didn't do much about it. And most Jews feel that his successor, Pope Pius XII, did little to speak out, as I said, against the Holocaust. For nearly 2,000 years, there was enmity between Jews and the Catholic Church. When Christians look at the cross, they see a symbol of God's love. When Jews look at the cross, we get the heebie-jeebies. And we see it as a symbol of oppression and persecution. The Catholics considered Jews abandoned by God, and the Jews considered Christians as idol worshippers. The long and painful history makes the papal declaration of Nostra Aetate in 1965 truly remarkable. No longer were Jews considered cast aside by God. The document declares, God holds the Jews most dear for the sake of their fathers. He does not repent of the gifts he makes or of the calls he issues, such as the witness of the apostle. In company with the prophets and the same apostle, the church awaits that day, known to God alone, on which all people will address the Lord in a single voice and serve him shoulder to shoulder. Jews are no longer officially considered Christ killers, the document went on to say. True, the Jewish authorities and those who followed their lead pressed for the death of Christ. Still, what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. The Nostra Aetate also officially condemns anti-Semitism. The church decries hatred, persecutions, display of anti-Semitism directed against Jews at any time by anyone. When Pope John Paul visited Israel in March 2000, he followed the Jewish custom of leaving a slip of paper in the cracks of the walls of the Kotel HaMaravi, of the Western Wall in Jerusalem. On his slip of paper, he wrote the following: The God of our fathers, you chose Abraham and his descendants to bring your name to the nations. We are deeply saddened by the behavior of those who in the course of history have caused these children of yours to suffer. And asking your forgiveness, we wish to commit ourselves to genuine brotherhood with the people of the covenant. Some Jews have been very slow to acknowledge the changed attitude amongst Catholics. The traditional rabbinic attitude towards Edom, towards Esau, was definitely to view him with suspicion. In Parshat Vayishlach, when Jacob and Esau are reunited after 20 years, the Torah tells us, Esau ran to greet him. We're going to read this in a few weeks. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept. It's a very beautiful scene. One gets excited when one reads that, to think that at long last peace came between the two. But you know what the Midrash does? The Midrash says the only reason Esau wept is because when he fell on Jacob's neck, he tried to bite it. But his neck had turned to marble and Esau hurt his teeth. That's the Narishkeit, the Mishagas. Rather than looking at it positively that they made shalom, that they made peace after all that time. But you know, there are other rabbinic interpretations as well, because Rashi brings the following teaching from Sifrei Reb Shimon. He says, Reb Shimon, the son of Yochai, said, is it not well known that Esau hated Jacob? But at the moment that they saw one another, his pity was really aroused, and he kissed him, belev shalom, with a whole heart. I prefer to feel that one better than the other. Maybe the right way to read that verse in the Torah is to accept it at face value. After a long period of separation and enmity, the brothers were happy to join together again and to put aside their differences. Let us learn from the late Father John, Alav Shalom. Let us reach out to and encourage those Christians, such as Father John, who have reached out to the Jewish community in love and in friendship. And may we give love and friendship in return. As the Torah teaches, we are all created in the divine image. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.